And with that, I will get started. We are going to be talking about economic development marketing, and we're going to be looking at the 10 musts of economic development data. And then we're going to look again at a kind of checklist at the end, so you can consider, how the data you're using stacks up and whether you have, some needs or places where maybe you could be expanding on things or using it sometimes more effectively. Sometimes the data is there, but it's really about using it effectively. I also just wanted to give you a heads up that Stevie has a hard stop with us today at 2 o'clock. I always try and keep our webinar short and sweet, but if for some reason we go over with questions, she will have to leave us, but she will be available with questions, and I'll have her contact information at the end as well. So let's take a look at some facts about economic development marketing. We know from the research that we've done that more than 98% of site selectors, location advisors, and businesses are using the websites of economic development organizations at some point in their location research. And we also know that typically they do their research online before they ever get in touch with you. So you may not actually know that they are checking out your location, looking for information about your community, while they're doing those kinds of things online, which is really why that data that we put online is so critical, because sometimes that's where those decisions are made before you even know that you were in the running. And we want to make sure that you have the kinds of information presented in the way that is most useful, so that you don't actually lose any leads before even knowing that you were in the running. So with that, we're going to take a look at what we see as the 10 musts of economic development data. First of all, we want to make sure that your data you have is accurate and up to date. Data that is 5 years old or 10 years old, or, depending on the data itself, even a year old when it comes to business data, we know that that can really make the data completely irrelevant because businesses are opening and closing all the time. So we want to make sure the data is correct and it's updated. We want to make sure that the data is customized to your location. Obviously, you want to be showing them information about your community. We want to make sure that it's robust. We want to make sure that the data is relevant, that this is the kind of information that site selectors and businesses are looking for. We want to make sure as much as possible that that data is interactive and dynamic, because we want people to be able to engage with the data, to do some kind of analysis and research for the things that they're looking for. We want to make sure it's granular. So granular implies that it is both hyper-regional and hyper-local, that you can go from the very big regions right down to drill down to the actual location, sometimes around a specific address, site, or property. I want to make sure that that data is presented visually, because nothing is more boring than long lists of text and numbers. We want to try and present that in more engaging ways. We want to make sure that they can easily export and share that data so that they're able to use it and report, that they're able to share it with businesses or with colleagues or with people who may be involved in the decision-making process. We need to make sure that the data is easily tracked and analyzed, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And finally, we want to make sure that it's fully optimized for mobile. I'm going to share some figures with you that explain just how critical mobile has become when it comes to presenting that data. So this gives you the kind of overview of what these 10 essential components are. And now I'd like to drill down and look at each one of these 10 a little bit more closely. So we're going to start here with the idea of accurate and up-to-date. This sounds pretty obvious, right? I mean, I guess you assume that any data you put out there should be meaningful, that it should be correct at very least, and that it also should be really up-to-date. We want to take a look at the sources that you're using, and we know that data must be frequently updated, that, looking at both current year but also projections. I think we have an example here, Stevie, of data from one of the reports that we use on Zoom Prospector. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this kind of data?
Absolutely. GIS Planning actually purchases this data, and it is updated 4 times a year for our business data, which is so important. As everyone knows, businesses will make decisions in your community and either move and become in a different location or come into your community. Some may leave, and so these numbers are constantly changing. We want to make sure we grasp that new data and information, so it's not only interactive, but again, it's refreshed every quarter.
Absolutely, and I think when we're looking at the mapping data, we know that maps, you think that an area looks exactly the same, but in fact, roads change all the time, businesses open and close. So the mapping data that we're using is also really critical. We're using, Google Maps, so we know that that's a really reliable resource. And that's something that you can trust that's always going to be updated as well. All right, let's talk about the idea of it being customized to your location. It's sometimes easy to think that site selectors and businesses are just looking for specific sites or properties, but in fact, we know that they're really looking for communities, for larger locations based on things like, business clusters or talent available, workforce data, demographics, infrastructure of different kinds, utilities. There's so many things that go into that decision about a community. And then they can look for the lands or buildings, because after all, there's warehouses and sites and properties everywhere, really. So we want to make sure that people can find critical data about your region specifically by putting it on your EDO website. So that means really kind of designing the website to provide that in easy to find and easy to digest ways. So an example that we have here from Idaho Commerce is that you can start very clearly the sites and buildings, analysis at the very top, but there's also ways that you can look at these different data tools, the intelligence components that we've got listed down here, things like demographics, business analysis, mapping data, and comparing communities that are within this particular service area. And that's really where that kind of customized geography comes into play, really quite critical. If you look a little bit more closely at the intelligence components, you can see that it's really, again, about drilling down into that particular community and looking within there. There's an example here from the Georgia EMC website where they're using an intelligence component that focuses on a specific business cluster. In this case, they're looking at aerospace, and it opens on that page so that you can see at a glance what is happening in this particular geography related to that industry. So critical. Comparison is another example. If you want people to understand how your community or location compares with others, then these comparison tools are really quite useful, and you can compare multiple communities. I think more than just two. I think we go up to 11, or perhaps we don't even limit it anymore at this point. This is really quite useful. And at the same time, giving people a snapshot of that kind of localized or customized geography is critical. And you can see in these community profile infographics that it's really about looking specifically at a glance, what is the story of this particular community? This is just one part of the infographic. It's interactive. It's all live data. So as the data is refreshed, the infographic is refreshed. And it's interactive. And we'll talk a little bit more about that interactivity in a moment. In this case, we're looking at the Pennsylvania website, their Sites and Buildings database, their Zoom Prospector tool. And that's really important because we're able to see what is happening in that particular state, both in terms of the available sites and properties, but also as we drill down deeper, things like demographics and labor force and consumer spending and housing and infrastructure and utilities and talent. So much information built into this one particular place. Similarly, if you look a little bit more closely, we can now look at the data for the city of Pittsburgh. So it's not enough to just have it on the state. That's really useful, but we want to be able to show what's happening in our communities as well. Did you have any thoughts, Stevie, about that kind of local versus kind of county or state basis, and what the kind of advantages are to being able to focus in on the local?
Oh my goodness, that list could be so long. I know we're limited in time, so I'll just kind of run through some of the first thoughts that I had. First of all, I think it's important to really stress the word interactive, that this data, it's so rich, but it's so interactive. Second, as a former economic developer of a regional organization, my cities still looked for their local data. They didn't necessarily need information from the other cities on population numbers. And so that gives you kind of that more ability to drill down information on something that may be important for your community residents and businesses. I also believe that with local data, you kind of eliminate some of the opportunities for competition when businesses are looking at other areas. You want to kind of keep them where you are rather than looking outside of your boundaries.
Absolutely. I think that's really important because we're competing with everyone, not just, the community next to us or the community across the country. So we really want to make sure that we're showing off that data within our own boundaries. An example here from the Size Up Local Business Intelligence tool. And so this is kind of a really interesting market intelligence tool for businesses that are looking to kind of grow and become more successful, is they need access to this kind of data too. Sometimes we focus on attracting businesses more than we think about supporting the businesses we've already got. And this is really kind of a very useful way to give them data so that they can make decisions, decisions they have to make all the time. And sometimes they have to really make them in the dark because they don't have access to it. Another factor about the data that we want to look at is the fact that it is robust and comprehensive. We need to ensure all the critical types of data are found on your website. So, just kind of the broad categories of things you want to think about are demographics. We want to make sure we've got the population figures, that they are updated and correct. Age, sex, race, income, educational attainment, all of that useful information. And that can actually, again, be drilled down. We can export it. We can take a look at it on a map. If you'll see on the bottom in this particular intelligence component, you can click on the map and you could see it layered out there. We're going to talk about visuals in a minute, but sometimes you just look at those lists and it doesn't really tell you the same thing that it would if you could see it on the map itself. And here you go. This is what happens if you click on that and you actually choose to map it. At a glance, you can actually see where those kind of layers fall and what that might mean in terms of location decisions. We want to think about labor data, of course, types of employees and businesses in your area. And we want to be able to drill down wherever possible so that we can, again, this is all interactive. You can click on any one of the figures, 1 to 4 employees, 250 to 499 employees, and then you can actually see that on the map. And if you notice up on the top, these reports are all modifiable. You could do it by radius up to 60 miles, drive time up to 60 minutes. So that, again, you've got a little bit more of that granularity that you can look around a specific area. Another way that you can look at the top industries by jobs, and this is from the infographics, you can click on them and see how they are, where they actually fall. It's time series data, so that gives you a sense if there's going to be change within a particular industry as well. Looking at,
it's crazy. I'm sorry, Elisa. It's crazy how far data has come over the course of my, 18 years in this career. I remember those PDF documents you would purchase from Claritas or DataQuick that really didn't tell you a whole lot of information outside of a few numbers. And just to be able to drill down to find out not only where your competitors may be located, but your supporting industries, the major employers as you're showing now, or employees that you're showing now, the levels of demographic data really can help your businesses make decisions on next steps.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, because those static PDF lists actually sometimes are counterproductive now. They aren't necessarily giving people the data they want or need. And since there's nothing more they can do with it, it kind of says something about how much information you can give them to help make that decision. We really have come a very long way in what we can offer. And part of that here is this consumer and retail data that we can, look at detailed consumer expenditures, really important for retail, obviously, retail potential, the modifiable radius drive time that we were talking about, and how you can actually look at that. Here's an example of a consumer spending report. And it really gives you at a glance a sense of what the market might be in a particular area. When it comes to business and industry data, instead of lists that you might used to have of existing businesses, we can go right down to the 6-digit NAICS level. This must be current, as Stevie said earlier, because businesses are opening and closing all the time. We really need people to see at a glance what's going on. Here's an example from the agriculture, forestry, and fishing and hunting businesses. This is the mapping component, the business component. You can take a close look at that and see at a glance what is happening in a really important industry within that place. And you can also map the businesses by color. So again, at a glance, that power of visual lets you see around a particular address, as we're seeing here in Pittsburgh. You can click on any one of those dots and it will tell you the basic information that you need, the name of the company, contact information, links to the website. And this tabular data lets you drill down, as we said, into more detailed industry levels, right down to the 6-digit NAICS code. And then, as we said, you can open any one of those dots and you get information about the name of the company, number of employees, sales estimates, websites where available, and you can save this. So you can make this part of the different folders. You can look for the reports around that particular business.
Elisa,
Yep.
did you know that you could also measure from one point on the map to one of those businesses to actually see distance-wise how far that information one business may be from your site or location of interest?
That's right. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I think that's under tools, is it?
It is. And so it's just another way to view the data. So if I'm an architect firm and I want to be close enough to other architects and those in my supporting industry, but not close enough that those companies can see who's walking in my door, you can actually measure from one location to another on that map, still using that same data of the business detail that you have. It's really quite amazing.
Well, that is really useful because you can get all sorts of information about suppliers, competitors, other people in your supply chain. It's useful for your existing businesses as well. Another snapshot here, we were taking a look at that, is how you can kind of map out particular industries, things that are important to you. If you're trying to develop a particular cluster, that's an easy way to show that on a website page. So as soon as people open it, the data is there waiting for them, and they don't need to themselves drill down for it. We know, of course, geographic data, the GIS data, things like infrastructure, incentive zones, parks, educational institutions, energy, and utilities. We just added important utility layers a short while back. Telecommunications, points of interest, all of that is easily mapped. You could take a look here on the Miami-Dade sites, look at different kinds of educational institutions. And in this case, it's broken down even by the degrees that they're offered, which is kind of fun. You can look at zones, and Miami-Dade sites is a really rich one when it comes to local GIS data. So that's something that they were able to break down as well. And then maybe you've heard about our new talent pool reports. Do you want to let people know about that, Stevie?
Absolutely. The new talent reports will actually show you degrees earned by your students, excuse me, I'm stumbling through that, on the top 5 programs by graduates, top 5 universities within a user-entered radius, the programs offered, the degree that the actual student has graduated in. The level of data here is unlike any data that I've ever been able to use in my career. And you get some statistical data that would just be, again, in those static reports. This actually allows the user to enter in universities and colleges within 20 minutes of their city, 30 minutes of their city, so you really can get an idea of the talent pool that's coming from your area.
Yeah, being able to access information about degrees conferred is really important. I don't know any other simple way to do that. And we're hearing from clients how excited they are because internally that really saves them a lot of time. Another point that we want to talk about, another must of ED data, of course, is making sure that it's relevant to your users' needs, because we know suitable sites and properties databases, they really exist everywhere, but they want to know why they should choose your location over another one. And so you need to use your data to tell the story of your location, showing investors what you could offer. And that's a really nice way to use something like these infographics. They're extremely popular, the community profile infographics, because as we said, it's live data, so it's automatically updated. You don't need to get your graphic designer out to redo it every time the data gets changed. And because it's interactive, you can look, for example, in this, look at age distribution, it's time series, you just slide the little bar along, and then it'll take you from place to place. That interactivity that we were just showing you in the time series data on those reports is really critical, because you can't always assume what people are looking for. So if you're just giving them those static PDF lists that Stevie was talking about, you are guessing what they're looking for. But also because you want to really engage them. You want to make sure that they're on your website and that they're doing the research that they're interested in. So being able to compare communities, things like pinpoint tool, radius, drive time, polygon tools, the interactive reports with dynamic mapping, all of that kind of lets people drill down so that you can look a little bit further within the data itself. An example here of the polygon tool, so that you can, draw it, pick what it is that you were looking for specifically within that one place. And the, I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to come back to this afterwards because I want to show you what these examples look like. You could just see here at a glance that if you click on these things, it creates these kind of heat maps at the top. So we can take a look at any one of those on the labor force report at the bottom. Anything in green can be clicked upon and it will display in heat maps on the map above. So it again gives you that kind of a instantaneous example, visualization of what it is that you're looking for. And this idea of granularity, we were talking a little bit about that before, but it's really about slicing that data in different ways, going down to the census block group or up to the entire region. If you just get data at the county level, for example, how is that going to help you make a decision about whether or not this is the right warehouse for you? You need to be able to really go a little bit deeper. So you've got sometimes that regional data is really quite useful. Example here in Oregon, we can see at a glance, different kinds of properties. We can take a look here at the heat maps on employees. Quite useful, but then we can go down to a specific business and do that same kind of heat mapping around a specific property that we might actually be interested in. It's giving us a lot more information. And we can modify this, of course, as we said, based on drive time or based on radius, so that you really get to choose what the kind of level of granularity is for you. As you see where these two arrows are, this is where you get a chance to modify those particular reports. Other examples is whether you want to look at a specific city. As we see here on the Idaho site, you could choose the community profile that's of interest to you based on the city that's important to you. You could do that kind of comparison we were talking about before and look at multiple communities or just two. They really want to put that level of engagement in the hands of the site selector, the business. And being able to switch over to satellite view lets you get a closer look at where the exits and entrances are to a particular property and see what it actually looks like around and go right down to street view and see what it looks like if you want to actually, the access, will your trucks be able to fit into the driveway? All that information is readily available. You can drill down kind of, as we said, within the business report. You can go right down and look at any one of those specific ones and break it down, modify it according to radius in this particular case, and take a look and see what that offers you. And so this brings us to our next point. Did you want to jump in there, Stevie?
If you could go back that last page real quick.
Sure.
I just wanted to, if that's possible, I just wanted to kind of touch on this for just a moment. The data is so deep and detailed that your user could actually find out how many professional or architect firms, I'm going to use architects again as another example, are within 7 miles from a particular place on the map who have 2 employees or more and an annual revenue of $3 million and have been in business 2 years. That's how detailed that data gets. So not any 2 people will probably enter all of the same variables. So it really just has that ability to answer those questions on the fly with that current data. So when a site selector or interested business actually calls you, they've done so much of the research on their own because you've given them the tools to do that, that you already know they're interested. It's like they've already gone through the qualification period because they've gone through so many different steps. Now it's just a matter of actually putting the numbers together and looking at available property.
Yeah, that's really important because if they can't find that information, there may be other communities that are making it easily available. And sometimes it's easier to just go off and look for it somewhere else. And you don't want to be kind of ruled out or struck off a list just because that information wasn't readily available. And we hear from people of how useful it is internally as well, right? Because this research sometimes is important in terms of building a case for a prospect, and you have that literally at your fingertips. Makes things much easier for your staff. Let's talk about...
Yes, I would get calls. Oh, I'm sorry. I would get calls from brokers asking me about the number of people or businesses within 5 miles of a particular intersection because they had a business actually looking at a particular intersection or place. And so this provides the answers to all of those questions. And you as a user actually, or as the owner of the information, the website, actually get to see what people are researching and pulling up. So
Right.
You can kind of track what people are doing and where particular areas of interest are.
Absolutely. That's really important because you want to know what's the areas of greatest interest. We're going to take a look at that actually in a moment. So let's talk about visuals. How important it is, as we said, to present instead of just long lists of data. We want to put them in chart formats. We want to be able to put them in maps where possible. Our LBI tool is kind of fun because this local business intelligence tool is very visual. So you can just look at the graphs and you can see, how are you doing in terms of revenue? How are you benchmarked against others within your region, within the state, within the country? And it is extremely visual. You don't need to, have a degree in accounting to be able to understand what's going on. Do you size up? Is a question that you can easily answer on these particular questions. And because it's all mapped out, again, visually, you can see where are your competitors, where are your suppliers, how does all of this fit together within the particular interest, makes location decisions much easier. And here we have a screenshot actually from the newly completely redesigned zoomprospector.com. I'm not going to spend too much time on that right now. It's in you can go over and check it out. It's in soft launch with our clients at the moment, but it is still publicly available, and we encourage you to go and check it out. And this is an example of the Economic Development Organization profile, the EDO profile for Greater Rochester Enterprise. As you scroll down, all this information is there with links back to their website. There's a scrolling slideshow at the top. There's all sorts of click-through data for the specific communities within their service area, their own version of an infographic at the bottom, so that you really have that ability at a glance to get a sense of what is this community about? What is this location about? There's so much information that is presented visually. And that link is in there. So when you get a link to this particular presentation in the email I'm going to follow up, you can click through to that and take a look at them. Let's talk about how important it is to export and share our data, because we know that reports need to be made and people want to be able to pass this on through social sharing. It's pretty easy to export a PDF. All the reports have that button clearly available for them. You can, on the intelligence components, often export the reports itself. Again, really easy to be able to pull it out. So you can share a map, you can share what the report actually is. And of course, there's all the social sharing. You can send a link to a particular report, you can email it, you could post it on the social sites. So that makes it really important and easy to share that. Property report that you see over here has both the export PDF at the top, but it also has the QR code at the bottom. So someone can just, if you wanted to print it out or put it, if you have a brokers who are interested in posting them in different places in their office or in their windows, people can be taken right to the report as well. And of course, you have these share links in multiple places. On the community infographics as well, it's really easy to share this. They're so beautiful, really proving to be very, very popular. You don't want to hide something that is this appealing, this visual. So there's all sorts of easy ways to share that with your friends too. When it comes to the Size Up local business intelligence site, you can also use them to export reports. So the businesses themselves are really often interested in exporting this data for their own uses. And that's really something you can do at the click of a mouse. These are the talent pool reports that we were talking about before. You can either export the beautiful charts individually as JPEGs or PNGs, or you can export the whole talent pool report around a particular area by clicking on the PDF button over there. This is an example. If I just exported that chart, this is what it actually ends up looking like. And we're nearing the end of our presentation here. So I just want to reference what Stevie was talking about, how important it is to be able to track and analyze the data on your website. Some of you may be familiar with Google Analytics. There's so many things you can check out there, where your traffic is coming from. Are you getting a lot of traffic, for example, from Mexico after a recent trade mission? You want to be able to take a look at that. Is it organic search? Are you using social? Is it paying off? Are you actually, finding that searching is important? You might think, well, my communications web person is looking at that. But if you're in sales, if you're interested in attracting businesses to your community and speaking to site selectors, you want to be on top of this data as well, because this really is more than just communications data. And of course, if you're using our Zoom Prospector tool, you'll be familiar with that it has its own completely separate set of analytics that complement Google Analytics. And that looks at, what are the most popular properties and sites. What are people looking at? Which ones have they been checking out? There's all sorts of really useful information related to economic development that can be viewed specifically through that analytics. This lets you take a look at what kind of demand there is. What are the potential new markets? You can use, blogs and marketing a little bit more strategically and make sure that they're aligned. Just a quick example here of Google Analytics and the kinds of things. If you've never seen it, then I have a separate webinar video that I'd be happy to share with you where I walk our economic development professionals on how Google Analytics can be used for you in terms of the kind of sales and marketing of your location. We can take a look at that. And we did talk a little bit about mobile at the beginning, but I think it's important to note that mobile is just growing exponentially. We are seeing in our own data that as many as 30% of site selection website visitors are using mobile devices, things like smartphones and tablets. And we've probably all had that experience of trying to look at a desktop site using your smartphone, and you have to zoom in and your fingers are too big to hit the little links, and it gets really, really frustrating. Do you want to tell us about mobile, Stevie? Are you still with us? I know you need to go in a moment. Oh, I may have lost Stevie already. I know that she did have a hard stop at 2:00. And I also know we're coming to the end of our time here. So let me walk you through this. Basically, this is an example of our mobile site. It is fully featured and it has everything that you would find on the desktop site, except it is all completely available on mobile. So you can look at the mapping, the property reports, the demographics, the business, business data, business reports, all that information that you were able to see on the desktop site, it's all still there on mobile. We want to make sure that we don't lose anybody just because they're frustrated trying to, zoom in on their little smartphone screen to look at your website. And this is our +1 here, which is that you want to make sure that any of the data tools that you've got on your website are easy to find. We have, I spend so much time on economic development websites, and I can tell you how many people bury their data sources. Why would you do that? You want to make sure that your site selectors and businesses can easily and quickly see it. So if you look over here on the Idaho Commerce site, at a glance, you know exactly where that data is. It's really clear, and there's redundancy built in. So you've got the tabs at the top for people who like to read those things. You have the buttons in color-coded that let you walk through them, and then you have them linked again at the bottom. So that makes it really clear what you're looking for. One thing that's often overlooked is letting people know where you are. You can't assume that everyone knows where Gallup is. Well, Texas, of course, but not everyone knows that, especially maybe dealing with businesses in other parts of the world. So a quick map that shows us where you are and how we can actually go into the economic development portal is really, really critical. Some of our clients like to use the widget that you see here with a property search, so you can look for buildings or sites or communities directly from any page on the website, and it will bring you over to the results on the data tool as well. Maybe you have a page on your website about demographics. Well, this is an opportunity to build in those kinds of data tools directly onto those pages. The intelligence components you see at the bottom there, the demographic intelligence component, lets you put that data at people's fingertips. So if you're looking for information about maps on the South Central Kentucky website, you will see at a glance the interactive mapping tool that lets you look for all of that information. And you'll also see the widget over there on the left-hand side. So if you want to look for sites and buildings, you can use that to go directly there. So this brings us to the end of our presentation today. So we know that you can look at these. These are kind of the variety of things we looked at. The idea that data should be accurate, customized, robust, relevant, interactive, granular, that it should be presented visually, and that it should be easily exported and shared. We want to make sure that it's easily tracked and analyzed, and that it is fully optimized so that you get that information all in one place. And as we said before, we also want to make sure that it's easy to find. So let's take a look at some of the things that we were, let's take a look at some of the questions that we've got here today. Again, I just want to point your information down to the question panel over on the right-hand side. So we want to take a look at some of these things. What are what are some of the questions that we've got? So I'm going to take a look at that. We are able to, someone asked about historical analysis or showing trends. That is a really, really important, because the current situation and the projections that we can offer are really quite useful, but sometimes people want to know what's been happening in the past. And so we have that information. If you take a look and many of the infographics have this kind of time series data. So you can go backwards in time to look when it comes to industries, when it comes to demographic data of different kinds. You can actually go backwards. There's a really excellent question. Someone wants to know how you add the talent pool tab. So the talent pool tab, for those of you who are familiar with Zoom Prospector, if you open any property report on our US sites, we're still trying to put this together for our Canadian clients. You can just look, you'll see that there's demographics and community information and consumer spending and business and industry, and talent is over on the right-hand side. So you can go and take a look at that out. I can show you an example of that afterwards. A couple people have asked if I could include the link to the webinar on Google Analytics when I send the email with this recording and this presentation. So absolutely, I would be very happy to include that in the follow-up email. And if you have any questions about that, please let me know. Okay, several requests for that. The intelligence components, are they responsive? So that's a really excellent question. They are responsive. That means that if you are looking at them on a particular screen and you switch over to a smartphone, or you adjust the size of your screen, they adjust in size so that you are able to look at them, and they will kind of fit the size of the screen that you're looking at. Absolutely, that's really important. Some more requests for copies of this, absolutely. About the accuracy of the data. So I can tell you that we use top quality data sources. Our data is always sourced on there. If you have any questions about that, or you can't find it, let us know. We would be absolutely thrilled to share that with you. But this is all really top quality data. As we said from the beginning, if the data is not accurate and up to date, then it really isn't worth anything. And we really pride ourselves on offering absolutely reliable data. So that is, it's number one up there on my list. I want to make sure that we can absolutely guarantee that. And someone's asked a question about these data tools, whether they would replace a website or are they an ancillary within an existing site. That's actually a really interesting question. Part of what we do is we can put something like Zoom Prospector, your intelligence components, onto a splash page. So it doesn't have to be embedded into an existing website. This can become a standalone website. We will work with you on the domains. We have a variety of different templates and a designer who can help you to make sure. So this can be kind of a standalone page on its own. There are many EDOs who like to have a different website as well, and that this is kind of an ancillary to that. And that they work together and complement each other. But it is possible to see that you could build in much, if not all, of the information that you need into a splash page that includes Zoom Prospector and the other online data tools that we've been talking about today. That's certainly a possibility as well. The Zoom Prospector profile for Canadian clients. So we've had questions about that. This is zoomprospector.com. We are looking into bringing zoomprospector.com. This is the national site selection portal. You can see an example of that here. This is the Rochester profile that we were looking at. And this is, if you look back at the beginning, this is just the national site selection portal. You can begin by looking for any particular communities or properties or economic development and organizations based on criteria, if you know that you've got them. We would like to bring this into Canada. This is just something that is in development, and we will absolutely keep you on top of that. This brings us to the end of our time here. I know that there are a couple of extra questions, and I do want to make sure that I get in touch with you. I just want to put my contact information up here on the screen. So if anyone has any questions that you did not hear addressed at the end of the presentation here today, I will reach out to you, or I will pass you on, your question on to the appropriate person within the company who can address that. Please feel free to get in touch with me or with Stevie if you have any additional information or questions about that you want us to address. We're really happy to do that. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Again, you will be hearing from us in the next couple days, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to join us. And Have a great day. Bye-bye.